Have you ever witnessed a genuinely nice person get backstabbed for no apparent reason? What happened? I found out a colleague hadn't applied for a big promotion, so I asked why, as she had shown a lot of interest in the past, having covered the position quite enthusiastically. She told me that she had been off for a few weeks, and on her first day back had given another colleague a lift home massively out of her way. It was common knowledge in the office the vacancy was coming up, and we were just waiting for our to open up applications, so whilst driving it came up. But the other person said that applications hadn't opened yet and they hadn't heard anything about the role in a while. Applications closed the following day, and I know for a fact the person who denied knowing about the vacancy had already put their own application in a few days before. My colleague missed out on the role, and we all learned there was a snake in the office. What's worse is the petty asshole never stood a chance of even getting an interview for the role because she was known as lazy and quite argumentative. George, nice guy at a hardware store I used to shop at. He liked being busy and wasn't a big talker, so while the rest of the people at the store were standing around gossiping or on their phones, George would be straightening shelves, sweeping, etc. He was also very good about explaining DIY stuff to folks and was always helpful in pointing out the safest way to do something or giving you tips to save money. He worked there over 20 years and was the first guy fired in the recession because the manager thought George was too nice to resent being fired. George went to work at competitor in the next town, and once word got out that George was over there, half of the store's business followed him. That hardware store is now walk-in clinic. My pops worked for an oil company, started entry level, and worked his way up. I honestly cannot remember him ever taking a sick day. Quiet man, never caused a problem. The kind of guys you would want to work in your company. Full retirement was at 35 years. They laid him off at 32, just so they wouldn't have to pay full retirement. It crushed him. I watched him decline, struggle with depression, and eventually die a few years after being laid off. It's just sad that corporations can't honor employees who give their lives honoring the corporations. I used to work with this girl who honestly is one of the top 5 nicest people I've met in my life. She really did love this job too and cared about it. She actually had 2 jobs where she started at 4 AM for one of them, and the other job, the one I was at, ended at 10-11 at night. After all this, she'd give me rides home to cause I didn't have a car yet. One day her sister told her if she had half a brain she'd ask to be a server at a location, because she had been working her ass off for basically a year there, working double shifts every day. Not only did management not let her be a server once she quit, another girl who came a month before she quit ended up getting promoted to server by the end of that month. She was 3 years younger than her and had no experience serving. They just hated her for some reason, and I'll never understand it. I used to work with a lady in an audit department who was basically everyone's work mom. She did her job, but also liked to make sure everyone was happy. She kept track of everyone's birthdays, so she could make them a cake or cookies. She would offer to cover for you if you needed to leave early or take a long lunch or anything. Just overall a great person. Well, she was also one of the oldest in tenure, not age, employees at the company, and knew the CEO and most of the managers well. At one point there was an opening for a manager in a department she used to work in before moving to it. We all told her to go for it. The CEO herself even suggested that she go for it. So everyone assumed she was a shoo-in and that the interview was just a formality. So, after the interview, they give the job to someone else. My coworker feels really hurt and betrayed because why would the CEO push her to apply and then not hire her for the position? Months go by and the role is vacant again. Restruck to ring. The new manager got shuffled somewhere else, and again the CEO and some of the managers of other departments tell my coworker to apply. She is reluctant, but eventually she does, and they do it to her again. At that point she took it personally and felt like she did something wrong or wasn't a good employee or something. It killed me to see that shitty company break her spirit like that. Becky, if you somehow read this, you're the best and way better than that place deserves. There was this girl in high school who was probably the kindest person I have ever met. During a football game, She would always have 200 or so cupcakes to pass out. All types of different flavors and designs on them, and everyone loved them. Well, a group of girls didn't like the attention she was getting at all and asked to help pass out the cupcakes to help. Instead, they took the cupcakes and caked them quite literally on the girl's new car. It was everywhere. The windows, the exhaust, the wheels, and a back window was also open a bit, so anything they didn't smear on the car was shoved into that window. I felt terrible seeing the car afterwards, and only one of the girls took the blame for it and didn't even end up getting into too much trouble. Sorry about your cupcakes, Hannah. I was a McDonald's manager, and there was this kid who worked grill fryer. He was a little dumb, but this kid tried and had an amazing attitude even when the kitchen shit on his every move. Loved that kid. Anyway, the tiles around the oven and fryers needed to be relaid, so they were, and cardboard was thrown over them to cover the new grout. I told the kid when he came in, be careful, blah blah blah, and then it happened. He was moving from the cabinet above the oven to the fryers to the right and slipped. He wasn't ducking around. I tried to catch him, but missed and he hit hard. I witnessed the entire thing from inches away and wrote the incident report personally. He literally stepped on it, gently, and the grease from the kitchen must have built up because he straight went back. Head hit tile. He had a concussion, but was otherwise alright, except some back pain, which I think was worse than he let on. He filed for workman's comp, and they denied it. Said he had a history of unsafe workplace practices or something formal for duck off. Yet they didn't call me, the certified shift manager on duty, or even acknowledge the incident report. A woman I taught with, Mary, who was the sweetest, most helpful patient special ed teacher I have ever met, finished her degree and she and I started teaching the same year. She worked miracles with kids everyone else just gave up on. The principal was new to the school and let her go through 2 years of new teacher probation and let her think she was getting a continuing contract. He ousted her because he had final say on non-renewal, and because she was probationary. He didn't have to provide justification. The justification was that he installed a 25-year-old leggy blonde teacher from his former school. She hated kids. I went to high school with someone who had some form of mental disability. I can't say for sure what, but I would hazard a guess at Asperger's syndrome. She was a very nice person. Very outgoing in that she was always trying to make friends, but had a very hard time picking up on social cues and social norms. She was easily peer pressured, unfortunately, and oftentimes people would convince her to do things because they thought it would be funny, and she either didn't know to say no or maybe just wanted to take a risk to become friends. She was always kind and didn't have a bad bone in her body. It was extremely sad to see such a kind person so easily manipulated and treated poorly. On the list of things I saw happen to her, smoking cigarettes because the cool kids told her to, ultimately leading to her becoming a full-time smoker. Smoking weed on lunch break with the cool girls in the forest, and then being left in the woods not going back to class because she was scared. Someone spiked her drink in homeroom, and by 10 AM she was drunk and didn't know what had happened. And the ultimate insult, the ultimate Noah get the boat moment for me, was hearing of never knew who did it, or I would have said something, someone surprising her with the lunch they brought for her. This lunch consisted of a sandwich that was filled with magic mushrooms. This absolute waste of a human fed this poor girl, someone who the whole school knew had a mental disability, a very large quantity of magic mushrooms, and just let her unknowingly hallucinate at school. She was suspended for doing drugs at school. What a joke. And if memory serves me, she never came back, or maybe left at the end of that school year. My dad literally supported his family after moving to America for years. He sent money to his dad and stepmother, plus paid for his half-siblings' education, despite barely scraping by in the US. Fast forward to today, and all but one of them are doing super well financially. None of them showed up to my mom's funeral or did anything to offer support to my dad. Despite overcoming incredible abuse from his stepmother, I was still never allowed to call her out on it, and always told to look at things from her side, which was not justifiable in any way. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.